Hi and welcome to this second video in my three-part series on tackling the unseen section of Literature Paper 2. In part 1, I showed you how to annotate an unseen poem in just 5 minutes. Take a look at the description box below for a link to this video, and if you want to fast forward to the 8-mark question, there is a link to part 3 as well. Today I want to go through how to construct a 24-mark answer. Here is the poem we're going to look at. If you need a reminder or have not watched the first video, press pause to have a quick read. And here is a reminder of the question and how we can break it down. Essentially, it is asking us in what ways does the poet show the reader the impact that autumn has, as opposed to simply what the season looks like. You'll be assessed on 2 assessment objectives, AO1 and AO2. AO1 requires you to demonstrate a deep understanding of the poem. This means using words like "this suggests" to show that you have explored alternative interpretations. If you want to get some ideas, take a look at the first video in this series link. It also wants you to analyse the poem, which is what critical style means. And you should make sure that you express your opinions and interpretations and support them with evidence, which is what the personal response and second bullet point refers to. For AO2, you should be using the language, form and structure, as well as writer's methods to support your analysis. Again, the first video shows you examples of this. Taking a closer look, you can see that a level 3 answer will contain some explanations of the poem in relation to the question. So if you simply write about the literal interpretation, but do not link it to the question, you will not get very many marks. It's also worth noting that you get no marks for simply identifying writer's methods. Even a level 3 answer should explain the effects of writer's methods on the reader and the meaning. For a level 4 answer, you should also have clear, consistent and continuous explanations when answering the question. This means being accurate about the points you are making and supporting it with detailed explanations and examples from the text. To improve it to a level 5 answer, you should also be exploring alternative interpretations. For examples of these, you can take a look at my first video. And this should be complemented with exploring the impact that writers' methods have, rather than simply saying something like, alliteration emphasizes this point. So now that we understand the question and mark scheme, and also know how to annotate the poem, let's look at how you can plan the structure of your answer. To ensure that you include clear and focused points, I always recommend listing your points, which should be written as 1 point per paragraph, unless of course it makes sense to combine some points into one paragraph. And before writing each paragraph, make sure you highlight which annotations and quotes you will use. You can simply use different coloured highlighters to quickly do this. So here are some example points that we could make. We can see that the season is presented negatively and that the poem ends in an angry tone with the word rage. When looking at the form and structure, we can see that these also support this negative association that the speaker has with autumn. And finally, in writing a personal response, we could observe that autumn is an interesting choice for a negative-toned poem, since winter is more associated with images of bleakness and despair. This suggests that the poem is personal to the speaker and is more about his or her feelings rather than a poem that's simply about the season or the weather. When constructing an introductory paragraph, a good way to assess whether you have written a strong opening is to follow this rule. If someone does not know the question, they should know what it is by reading your introduction. It should also open your answer so that the reader knows what kind of things you intend to discuss. Here's an example. In Autumn by Alan Bold, the poet presents the effects of the season of autumn through a variety of poetic devices and language choices. When coupled with the form and structure, the overall tone of the poem is negative and we sense that the poet is troubled by the season. Press pause on this video if you would like to give it a go. Now let's look at how we can expand our first planned point into a paragraph. Here's an example. Press pause to have a read. Let's now take a look at how this answer relates to the assessment objectives. Here's a reminder of the mark scheme. You essentially have to use your judgment to analyse interpretations of the specific language and the writer's methods. One of the things that's required to maintain a personal response is making it clear that this is your judgment of the poem. So using words like I think makes this very clear. You can also see that the explanations are in relation to the question and they are clear, consistent, and continuous. An example of this in action is at the start of the paragraph. You should be able to spot more examples throughout the answer. Points should always be justified with examples from the text, and I have tried to do this as much as possible. And finally, you should see that I have considered alternative meanings and have got into a lot of detail when analysing the writer's methods. So now that you have an example of how to expand on one of your planned points, why don't you try constructing a paragraph yourself? You could use one of the points that I mentioned earlier, which you can see on the screen now, or if you've been making notes yourself, you could base it on one of your points. For ideas on what to write about, take a look at part 1 of this video series, the link for which is in the description box below. So I hope you have found this useful. The next and final part of the series focuses on the last comparison question of the unseen section of the literature paper 2. Keep practicing as this will really help. You'll be surprised at how quickly you will see improvements in your answers and how quickly you will start finding this easier. Thanks for watching and see you soon for part 3.